Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're zooming in on a substance that literally reshaped the map of the world, totally redefined human conflict, and basically built the modern age as we know it. We are talking, of course, about gunpowder. But here's the thing, despite its massive, undeniable impact on human history, the exact origins of this world-changing technology have been surprisingly muddy. It's been misunderstood and, honestly, sometimes deliberately obscured. So today, we're going to clear away the smoke and uncover the true origins of gunpowder.
It sounds like a pretty simple question, right? Who really invented gunpowder? But the answer has been tangled up in centuries of folklore, bad assumptions, and competing claims. For the longest time, if you opened up a history book, you'd probably find totally conflicting answers depending on what country that book was printed in. Luckily for us, modern historical research has given us a very clear picture. And honestly, getting to the bottom of this central mystery reveals a story that is way more fascinating than the legends.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Myths and Misconceptions, specifically focusing on the European myths.
Okay, let's dive into this. Before we talk about who actually invented it, we kind of have to talk about who didn't. For centuries, there was this incredibly persistent European myth claiming that a German monk named Berthold Schwarz, sometimes he's called Konstantin Onklitsin, invented black powder. The only problem? Historians have totally abandoned this idea because there is literally zero proof a monk by that name ever even existed, let alone invented a revolutionary explosive. Then you have the claims surrounding an English Franciscan monk named Roger Bacon. Now, Bacon actually did record an early European reference to a black powder mixture around 1267, but he wasn't claiming he invented the stuff. He was just writing about it as something that was already known. The historical reality and the overwhelming consensus among scholars today points firmly to 9th century Chinese Daoist alchemists as the true undisputed creators.
That brings us to Section 2, the elixir of life, or as I like to call it, experimental medicine.
So, if Taoist alchemists in China invented it, what exactly were they doing with it? Well, incredible as it sounds, they absolutely were not trying to make a weapon. Let's ground the chemistry here for just a second. At its core, granular black powder is a very specific physical substance made from a mixture of saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. Now, the Chinese had known about saltpeter since at least the mid-1st century AD. Alchemists knew it burned with this really distinct bright purple flame. So they were mixing these exact ingredients together, but not to blow things up. They were actually conducting experimental medicine. They were on the hunt for the elusive elixir of life, a literal potion for immortality.
So the crucial point is right here in the language itself. The Chinese word for gunpowder is hua yao. Translated literally, that means fire medicine. I love this because this etymology firmly anchors gunpowder to its accidental, pacifist roots. It was essentially an experimental medicinal byproduct. Just think about that for a second. The foundational technology for every modern firearm, every artillery shell, was originally intended to heal people. They were trying to cure mortality, and instead they accidentally whipped up the most lethal substance of their era.
And the historical records of these early medicinal experiments, they are absolutely amazing. Take a look at this quote from a 9th century Taoist text dating back to 858 AD. It reads, "Some have heated together sulfur, realgar, and saltpeter with honey. Smoke and flames result, so that their hands and faces have been burnt, and even the whole house burned down." Oh man, just imagine being a dedicated, highly trained 9th century alchemist trying to formulate a nice health tonic using honey and saltpeter, and you accidentally burn your entire house down. It's a genuinely funny and terrifying image, but it served as a very real warning to other alchemists. You have to be careful with the fire medicine.
Moving right along to Section 3, from medicine to military. This is where we see the weaponization of the powder.
Let's see how this builds, because obviously you can't have a substance that spontaneously bursts into violent flames without somebody eventually realizing its potential for warfare. The transition from an accidental medicine to a weaponized tool of war was incredibly fast. In 88 AD, we get one of the earliest confirmed formulas in a Chinese text. Fast forward just a century to 904 AD, and boom, we have the first recorded military application. They're using incendiary projectiles in actual battle. By 1044 AD, the Tang Dynasty military manual, the Wujing Zongyao, is actively recording specific chemical formulas for this mixture. The Chinese government even started restricting the trade of gunpowder ingredients to rival dynasties. The secret, as they say, was well and truly out.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the gunpowder age begins, looking at early weapons.
Now, it is really important to understand that the gunpowder of the 11th century wasn't exactly the earth-shattering explosive we think of today. There is a vital chemical distinction we need to make. Those early formulas recorded in the 1044 Wujing Zongyao
contained at most 50% saltpeter. Chemically speaking, that ratio just isn't high enough to create a true concussive explosion. What it does produce is a violently fast-burning fire. So early gunpowder weapons were strictly incendiary devices. They were designed to set enemy ships, siege engines, and troops on fire. They weren't blowing down castle walls. At least, not yet.
But innovation moved quickly, driving a rapid physical evolution of the actual weaponry. Step 1, they started strapping pouches of gunpowder to arrows, creating fire arrows. Step 2, the invention of the fire lance. This was basically a spear with a bamboo or paper tube of gunpowder fixed at the end, and it acted like a short-burst flamethrower. Pretty terrifying. But eventually, as they kept refining the powder to make it more explosive, they realized they could harness that force to push a projectile out of a metal tube. This gives us Step 3, true bombs and hand cannons. In fact, the oldest confirmed surviving hand cannon is the Chinese Xanadu gun, which dates all the way back to 1298.
Moving into Section 5, Global Transmission, and the historical consensus.
So the origin in China is undeniable at this point. The real debate among historians today is exactly how it spread so rapidly across Eurasia to the west. Tracking this global transmission is, well, it's incredibly difficult. Historians like Tonio Andrade face some major historiographical challenges here. First off, a lot of the records were written centuries after the actual events took place. Second, those original Chinese alchemical texts used these really deep, poetic metaphors that are incredibly hard to translate into modern scientific terms. Third, historical accounts get misinterpreted all the time. For example, at the Battle of Mohai in 1241, European records mention the Mongols using a weapon with evil-smelling vapors. Some historians confidently claim this was the first European gas attack using gunpowder, while others argue no, it was just a toxic smokescreen with no gunpowder whatsoever. The evidence is just too ambiguous. Finally, you have semantic shifts. The Arabic word naft originally meant naphtha, which is an oil-based incendiary, but later it evolved to mean gunpowder. The Chinese word pao changed from meaning trebuchet to meaning cannon. These constantly changing definitions make tracking the exact timeline an absolute headache for researchers.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how we can use the actual chemistry itself to track the maturation of the technology as it moved across the globe. By comparing common black powder mixes, a super clear pattern emerges. Roger Bacon's formula around 1252 used about 41.2% saltpeter. An 8th century text attributed to Marcus Graecus, though the copies we have are from way later, lists 66.6%. And today's ideal, perfect black powder, that sits right at 75% saltpeter.
So why does all that data matter? Well, the European formulas recorded in the 13th and 14th centuries diverged only slightly from the ideal proportions needed for a true explosive propellant. In China, we have this vast historical record of experimentation, moving slowly and painfully from 50% incendiary mixes all the way up to those explosive ratios. But in Europe, that long trail of trial and error experimentation just doesn't exist in the historical record, and this strongly reinforces the consensus among scholars today. Gunpowder absolutely did not develop independently in Europe. It was introduced to the West as an already mature, highly refined technology.
Section 6. Alternative Uses. Let's look beyond the weapons for a moment.
Before we wrap everything up, let's offer a quick palate cleanser. Because while gunpowder is synonymous with warfare, human beings are incredibly creative. And over the centuries, we've found some truly bizarre alternative uses for it. And this brilliantly illustrates just how weird history can be. Right after the Battle of Aspern-Essling in 1809, Napoleon's surgeon, Dominique Jean Laurie, was lacking salt, so he actually used gunpowder to season a horse meat bouillon for the wounded soldiers. Yep, gunpowder soup. It was also used for sterilization on ships. Meanwhile, British sailors used gunpowder to create tattoos when ink wasn't available. They would rub the powder directly into prick wounds in a method known as traumatic tattooing. And jumping all the way to the 20th century, starting in 1967, Los Angeles artist Ed Ruscha began using gunpowder as a primary artistic medium for a series of works on paper. So it really went from the battlefield to the soup bowl to the art gallery.
But as we bring this explainer to a close, let's zoom back out and return to the very beginning. The invention of the fire medicine, huiyou. It leaves us with a profound, almost tragic historical irony to ponder. How different would human history be if those ancient 9th century Taoist alchemists had actually found what they were looking for? What if they had genuinely discovered the elixir of life instead of accidentally formulating the deadliest, most destructive weapon in human history? It's a crazy twist of fate, one that permanently altered the trajectory of our entire world. Thank you so much for joining me to uncover the true origins of gunpowder. Catch you next time.